The trees seemed to shift positions every time they looked away. Lena noticed it first because she was the one who kept stopping. The trail was narrow and pale beneath a dusting of frost, winding through a forest that felt older than the map suggested. Pines stood close together, their trunks dark and ridged, bark flaking under gloved fingers like dry skin. Breath steamed from Lena's mouth in short clouds that vanished too quickly in the cold. The air smelled of sap and damp earth, sharp and clean, the kind of smell that usually made her feel grounded. But every time she turned her head, something was wrong. She'd glance back at the group. Tom a few steps behind, Mia farther back adjusting her pack, and when she faced forward again, the trees were different. Not dramatically, not enough to point at. Just a sense that the spacing had changed, that a trunk which had been slightly left was now slightly right, that the path ahead had narrowed by an inch or two. She told herself it was fatigue, light playing tricks through branches. The forest was quiet in a way that made small sounds stand out. Fabric brushing fabric, the soft crunch of boots, the faint whistle of wind threading through needles far above. "Do you feel like this trail is tighter?" Lena asked. Tom shrugged, breath puffing white. "Forests do that." Mia looked up from her straps. "Do what?" "Feel close," Tom said. "You're just cold." They kept moving. After another 10 minutes, Lena stopped again. Her heart was beating harder than it should have been. She turned in a slow circle, eyes tracing bark and shadow. The trees stood straight and still, roots half buried in frost, snow clinging to the north-facing sides. Nothing moved. Then she blinked. The space behind them felt longer. Not deeper, longer, as if the forest had stretched itself, trunks now spaced farther apart. The trail behind them subtly widened. She swallowed, throat tight. "Okay," she said quietly. "I think something's off." Tom frowned. "What now?" "The trees," she said. "They're not where they were." Mia laughed once, short and nervous. "That's not funny." "I'm not joking." They stood there, 3 figures breathing steam into the cold, surrounded by bark and shadow. The silence pressed in, heavy enough that Lena became acutely aware of her own body. The scrape of her jacket when she shifted, the pulse in her ears, the way her gloves creaked when she clenched her hands. "Let's keep going," Tom said. "We'll hit the creek soon. That'll orient us." They walked. The creek never came. Instead, the trail bent gently and returned them to a familiar stand of trees. One with a split trunk shaped like a crooked Y, its bark pale where something had scraped it years ago. Lena recognized it instantly. "We've been here," she said. Tom stopped, stared at the tree, then back at the trail behind them. "No, we haven't." Mia's voice shook. "Yes, we have. I remember that scar." They turned together, slowly, as if sudden movement might provoke something. The trail behind them looked correct, logical, but the trees flanking it leaned at slightly different angles now, shadows falling in unfamiliar patterns. Lena stepped off the path and pressed her palm to a trunk. The bark was cold and rough, solid beneath her glove. "Real." She closed her eyes for a second, steadying her breath. When she opened them, the tree was closer. Not by much, just enough that her arm bent at a sharper angle than before. She jerked her hand back. "Don't touch them," Mia whispered. They began to move faster. The forest grew denser, trunks crowding in, branches knitting overhead until the sky thinned to pale strips. Wind slid through the canopy, but it never reached the ground. Down here, the air was dead, heavy, every sound muffled. They tried to mark their path, scraping bark with a knife, stacking stones. But when they looked back, the marks were gone. Not erased, simply elsewhere. A scrape appeared on a different trunk. Stones formed a neat little pile several yards away, as if gently relocated. The realization settled slowly and terribly. The forest wasn't changing when they weren't looking. It was waiting until they did. Mia started crying quietly, the sound torn and breathless. Tom snapped at her to stop, fear sharpening his voice. Lena said nothing. She was watching the shadows. They were wrong. Not moving, not exactly, but pooling where they shouldn't, gathering between trunks even when the light hadn't shifted. She caught herself counting steps between trees, numbers slipping when she looked away. They came to a clearing that felt like relief. Space opened around them, frost-silvered ground unbroken. For a moment, Lena thought they were safe. Then the trees began to close in. Not rushing, not swaying, just nearer each time she glanced elsewhere. A trunk that had been 10 feet away was now 8, then 6. Bark loomed, textured and immense, shadows thickening at its base. "It's hurting us," Tom said hoarsely. The word felt right, too right. Panic broke whatever fragile order they'd maintained. Tom bolted for a gap between 2 pines. Mia followed, sobbing. Lena ran last, lungs burning, breath tearing out of her in ragged clouds. The gap narrowed. Branches snagged her pack. Fabric ripped with a sound like a scream smothered in cloth. She twisted, fell, frost biting through her clothes. When she scrambled up, the gap was gone, replaced by solid trunks pressed shoulder to shoulder. Tom was nowhere. "Mia!" Lena shouted. Her voice died quickly, swallowed by bark and shadow. She turned in place, wild now, heart hammering, breath loud and desperate. Everywhere she looked, trees. Too many, too close. She squeezed her eyes shut. When she opened them, the forest had arranged itself neatly around her. A circle of trunks stood evenly spaced, their shadows falling inward. The ground within was bare, untouched, as if prepared. Lena understood then, not with logic but with the cold certainty that settled into her bones. The forest hadn't been confusing them. It had been sorting. The wind finally reached the ground, brushing past her with a sound like a sigh. The trees leaned, not visibly, not enough to see, but enough to feel, their presence focused, attentive. Lena's breath fogged the center of the circle, and the forest, having finished arranging its pieces, grew very, very still. Their compass spun wildly whenever they tried to find their way back to the trail. It didn't happen all at once. At first, it was only a twitch, an impatient shiver of the needle as Rowan held the compass level in his gloved palm. The forest around them stood quiet and cold, trees dusted with frost that glittered faintly in the gray afternoon light. Breath rose from the group in pale clouds that drifted and vanished, leaving the air as empty as before. "Probably interference," Mark said, adjusting the strap of his pack. Fabric rasped softly in the stillness. "Old minerals in the ground." Rowan nodded, though unease prickled under his layers. He turned his body slightly. The needle swung, hesitated, then spun in a tight, frantic circle. Lena leaned closer, her breath brushing Rowan's sleeve. "That's not normal." They had left the main trail less than an hour earlier to check a marked overlook. A short detour, nothing risky. The map said it was straightforward. The forest agreed, offering no resistance. No thick undergrowth, no steep slopes. Just tall pines spaced evenly apart, their bark dark and ridged, their shadows long and narrow across the frost. Rowan turned away from the group, trying again. The needle steadied for half a second, north, clean and certain, then began to rotate, faster this time, a tiny frenzy of motion. The faint metallic whisper of it scraping against the housing felt far too loud. "Let's just head downhill," Lena said. "Trail should be east." Rowan looked up. The trees ahead appeared identical to the ones behind them, a repeating pattern of trunks and shadow. He took a step, boots crunching softly, then another. The forest absorbed the sound immediately. After 10 minutes, the overlook still hadn't appeared. Mark stopped. "Didn't we pass that one already?" He pointed to a pine with a long strip of missing bark, pale wood exposed beneath. Rowan's stomach tightened. He remembered it too, remembered walking past it the way the exposed would caught the light. "That's impossible," Lena said. "We're not looping." Rowan checked the compass again. The needle spun the instant it cleared his pocket, whirling so fast it blurred. When he turned his body slowly, carefully, the motion followed him, as if the compass were eager, excited to move. "Okay," Mark said, forcing a laugh that fell flat. "That's new." They tried again, this time with Rowan standing still while Lena walked a few paces away. Map open, gloved finger tracing lines she clearly didn't trust anymore. Frost creaked faintly beneath her boots. When she looked up, her eyes were wide. "The map says we should be seeing the ridge," she said. "There's nothing." The forest pressed close, not physically. There was still space between the trunks, but in a way Rowan couldn't quite articulate. The silence felt deliberate, padded, like a room designed to swallow sound. Even the wind stayed high in the canopy, needles whispering far above them, never touching skin. Rowan felt watched. He couldn't point to anything specific. No movement, no sound, just a tightening awareness, as if attention had settled on them, patient and unblinking. "Let's head back the way we came," he said. They turned together. Rowan didn't bother with the compass at first. He trusted his memory. 3 turns. A fallen log. A slight dip where frost pooled thicker. None of it appeared. Instead, they walked into another stand of trees. The same spacing, the same shadows, the same quiet. Rowan's breath came faster now, fogging his vision for a moment before clearing. Mark stopped again. "Rowan." "What?" "Check it." Rowan already was. The compass didn't spin this time. It snapped to a direction and held there, needle steady as stone. Relief surged, brief and sharp. Then Rowan realized the needle wasn't pointing north. It pointed directly between the trees ahead, down a narrow corridor that hadn't been there before. The trunks on either side stood closer than the rest, shadows pooled thickly at their bases. "That's not right," Lena whispered. Rowan took a step toward the indicated path. The needle trembled, then stilled again as if satisfied. Cold crept up his spine, slow and insistent. "Don't," Mark said. Rowan stopped. The needle began to rotate again, faster and faster. A tight, frantic spin that made his hand vibrate. He stepped back. The needle steadied, pointing once more into the corridor. They stood there, breath steaming, fabric shifting softly as weight shifted from foot to foot. The forest seemed to lean inward, listening. "It only behaves when you move," Lena said quietly. "Like it's reacting." Rowan tried turning in place. The needle followed, smoothly this time, not spinning but tracking his motion with uncanny precision. When he faced the corridor again, it locked into place. A choice, then. Mark swore under his breath. "This is wrong. This is really wrong." They argued in hushed voices, fear flattening their words. Rowan barely listened. He was watching the compass, the way the needle quivered when he hesitated, the way it calmed when he aligned himself with the indicated path, as if impatience could be measured. The light dimmed almost imperceptibly. Not night, just less day. Shadows stretched, knitting together. The cold deepened, seeping through boots and gloves. "We're running out of time," Lena said. Rowan nodded, throat tight. He took the first step into the corridor. The needle went perfectly still. The space between the trees felt wrong immediately. Narrower than it had looked, the air heavier, sound muted further. Frost lay untouched here, smooth and pale. Rowan's boots broke the surface with a soft, final crunch. Behind him, Mark hesitated. The compass needle twitched. "Come on," Rowan said, though every instinct screamed. They followed. The corridor wound gently, never sharply, never offering a clear view of what lay ahead. Rowan noticed how the compass no longer spun at all. It didn't need to. The needle pointed forward, unwavering, as if the concept of direction had been simplified to a single instruction. "Go." Rowan's breath rasped. His chest felt tight, compressed by more than cold. The forest on either side pressed close now, bark looming, shadows thick and watchful. He slowed. The needle trembled. Rowan stopped entirely. The needle spun once, slowly, deliberately, then settled again, pointing deeper into the trees. Rowan understood then, with a clarity that felt like ice water poured down his spine. The compass wasn't broken. It wasn't confused. It had never been trying to lead them out. It was aligning itself to something else. Rowan took another step forward, because the forest was quiet and waiting, and the compass in his hand had never been more certain.